Hi everybody, welcome to another Career Foundry live event, a skills workshop, and tonight it's going to be all about Figma. Now, my name is William, I'm events and communications lead here at Career Foundry, and this evening I'm very happy to welcome once again Craig Hansen, who is a visual designer and a Career Foundry mentor based in the sunny climes of Costa Rica. Last week Craig was in the USA, or 2 weeks ago, but now he's back in Costa Rica. Whilst people are joining, please drop your name. If you're watching in chat in Big Market, drop your name in the chat on the right-hand side, where you're joining from, why you're interested in UI design, and why you're thinking about a career change. We usually get a super international audience, so lovely to see everybody joining on the right-hand side. Before we kick off, and whilst people are joining, let me briefly introduce you to Career Foundry. So Career Foundry is the online school for your career change into tech, and we provide personalized programs in data analytics, digital marketing, product management, UX design, full stack web development, and the topic of this evening is UI design. So they're our kind of core career change programs. And the Career Foundry career change programs take you all the way from complete beginner to job-ready tech professional with one-to-one access to both a mentor and a tutor who are both experts working in their respective fields. And that's not all. Career Foundry programs are 100% online and flexible, which means you don't even need to quit your job to do them. And they're backed up by Career Foundry's job guarantees. So if you don't land a job in your new field within 6 months of completing the program, you get your tuition completely refunded. So that's the deal that we offer. Now, I think I've shamelessly plugged Career Foundry enough. It's great to see everybody joining on the right-hand side. We've got people joining from Turkey, the USA, Toronto, Munich, Armenia. Welcome, everybody. If you've got any questions for Craig during the workshop, please ask them, and I'll go through the questions and ask. If it's kind of more general questions, we'll ask them at the end in the Q&A. And in the handouts tab, you'll find the file that we're using today. So that's enough from me, Craig. I'm going to hand it over to you, and I'm going to disappear and stop talking. So everybody enjoy the webinar. And Craig, I'll leave it to you.
Okay, thanks, William. Thanks for that introduction. I love seeing where everybody's joining from. It's super global today, from Turkey to Argentina, etc. I don't think I've ever seen anybody in Costa Rica along with me, so that's fun. I saw that pop up. So yeah, I've been a mentor with Career Foundry. It'll be 4 years in January, working in the UI program primarily, a little bit with the UX side briefly a couple years ago. They approached me to do these about a year ago, and let's just go ahead and jump right on into it. I hope that what we're going to do here today is, I'm going to share my screen here, kind of just give you an overview of the Figma interface and maybe just demystify a little bit of the UI process and build something pretty professional fairly quickly. So the first thing is there is actually a desktop version of Figma, but it's kind of a weird one. It's not quite like an Adobe or Sketch in that sense. It's kind of like a shortcut. It just sits in your dock if you have a Mac, and I think it just shortcuts you more or less back to the browser. So I've actually started just using the browser version. If you were to double click on a .fig file, it doesn't open. You actually have to either drag it into this window, or if you wanted to import, you just go like so, and you would find it on your computer. And this is the one we're going to work on. So surfapp.fig. I already brought it in. It's a little bit big, so we don't want to spend too much time. But this page is kind of like your home page in Figma. You could kind of organize it by recents. Drafts, I believe, is the default. And then there's community, which doesn't want to open for some reason. And that's where you would find maybe templates or icons, etc., plugins, things of that nature. So I'm going to go back, and we're going to start here with the Surf app. So you just double click on it from that home page. And so we're going to start here. We got this kind of meta version of the full interface. So essentially over here on the left is your layers panel. And that will make more sense as we design, but it just includes everything that's in a particular frame or artboard. If you're coming from a different program, they usually call them artboards. And Figma calls them frames. So I'm going to try and use the correct nomenclature from now on for this webinar. And so you'll find layers and you'll find pages, and there's different things on different pages. So I clicked on page 1, and that's where we're going to be actually designing. There's that logos page, which I don't know what that is. And then there's this interface page. And it's just a nice way of organizing and keeping them a little bit separated. You could put components, you could put reference materials, etc., and you can make a page for that. You've got assets, and that would be things that we probably won't get into today, but again, that'd be like a saved thing. If you knew you were going to have a specific color and shape of button with a specific font, you could create a component like that and then bring it in to your designs and edit it a little bit quicker, but have that sort of basic framework always built in. Across the top here, we'll zoom in a little bit. Zoom in a little bit. Across the top here, we've got our toolbar. That's right here. This is under the Figma logo. It's how you could open a new file, edit. It looks like most projects, honestly. You can get your plugins here, and we will use a few plugins, so it'll stop being so abstract. And then you've got your direct selection tool. Really nice thing that Figma does is it knows that probably you're going to want to use that a lot. The direct selection tool is how you move things. So you just click on things and you can move them. And if you were, say, drawing a square, when I let go of that, if you'll watch that toolbar here, it popped right back to the blue. And the idea is, I don't probably want to draw another rectangle immediately. I probably want to move this one into place. I actually really love that little functionality where it always kind of pops right back to the direct selection tool. The little hashtag looking thing has your frames, which is what you design in. Like I said, they call them artboards and other projects. We probably won't get into sections or slices today. It's a little more advanced and not really necessary, but we will definitely be designing with some frames. Underneath the square is all your shapes. So you've got rectangles, lines, arrows, ellipses is what they call circles, polygons for triangles and etc., stars, and or place an image. There's multiple places that you can place an image, but this is one of those. And some of them have pretty intuitive key commands. So technically I don't have to go over there. If I just wanted to start drawing rectangles, I could just click the letter R on my keyboard. It goes straight to it and I can draw. If I hold Shift, I get a square. I get an equal sided. I get a rectangle of any number of shapes. If I go to the ellipse, I don't think O. It's O for oval. If you can kind of remember that, it's a little weird. They call it an ellipse, yet the key command is O. Whatever. If you can kind of remember that, that's cool. If not, it's really not that big a deal to go over. You'll kind of probably end up learning the key commands that you use the most, and the other ones you probably won't worry too much about. And same thing, if I start clicking and drawing, I can do any kind of odd shaped oval. If I hold Shift, I then get a perfect circle. And I'm going to go ahead and do one more, the polygon. Same thing, no Shift, I get any kind of shaped triangle. Shift, I get an equilateral triangle. And we're going to do a lot with pretty basic shapes here in just a little bit. Let me zoom back in, get a little bit tighter on that. Last couple things, pen tool that lets you draw custom shapes. I don't know if we're going to do that today. I have some it's a little advanced. I am going to show you a trick for creating something that looks like you drew it with a pen. A nice time saver. T for text, and that truly is if I hit the letter T, you'll watch this turn blue. I'm going to hit the letter T on my keyboard. It goes right to it. You can click and start typing. And then again, it always goes back to that direct selection, so I can immediately move it around, delete it, whatever. This is where they store things like components and plugins and widgets. There's multiple places basically to find these things. You could create them in Pages, you could do this, and we're going to use some plugins in a little bit. The hand tool at first seems like the direct selection tool, but instead of grabbing a thing, it actually grabs the whole thing. So it's a nice way. If you were kind of zoomed in on this right here and you're like, oh, actually I need to see a little bit more, that hand tool gets it over there without you having to zoom out. You can kind of just move things around and get them into place. And then last but not least, we've got this cool little speech bubble thing. It's a comment, and I can click it and say, I like the colors. And whoops, I don't know where they just went. Like the colors. I think I just needed to click off of it. There we go. don't know what it's doing. That's actually funny. It's being a little odd to me. If I do that, it should stay put. Oh, it did. It's just, it loads. I'm sorry. That's what it did here. So now I just have two. And you can just get rid of them, close them down, and or you can edit or delete them. I'm just going to leave them here for now. I think I just select them and delete to make them go away. Oh, that's what you do. You click, it's kind of like a Google Google Doc. You just click the check mark to say you resolved it. It's a really nice way of kind of putting notes, because one of the big reasons Figma took off in the last few years was that so many of us were working fully remote, and you no longer could go over and tap your colleague on the shoulder and chat. You needed to work from home. This is a fully cloud-based collaborative tool, again, kind of like a Google Doc. Everything happens in real time. In theory, all 600 of us could be working on this at the same time, and you'd see me making changes and I would see you making changes. And so obviously having the ability to say, you know, hey, try moving this over there, I don't think we're using that font anymore, et cetera, is a really beneficial thing. It definitely took off because of that reason. I'm pretty sure it's why Adobe had such interest in it that they went ahead and bought it. All right, so I'm going to zoom in here. That's the interface. So it's, it's not the whole interface. Sorry, one more thing. There's this properties panel or inspector panel, and that's this whole area over here. And it's responsive, so it actually changes depending on what I have clicked. So if I'm on text, any kind of text, it kind of changes to tell me about the text. It'll tell me some positioning, and it'll tell me the font, and I have the ability to change everything. I could make this much darker and bold. I could make it way bigger, etc. So it is the area. The properties panel is how you change a lot of things once you have first put them there. You can change the color here by clicking on that little box, and let's move it up so it changes in real time. I can move this anywhere and it continues to change like so. Now, if I were drawing a rectangle, for instance, it would change and not have any of that text information. It would simply tell me some positioning. It would tell me a little bit about the kind of layer it is. The color still changes in the same way. That all is no different. And I could add a stroke, which is an outside line. Let's go ahead and make that really big so you can see it. So it's a nice black. That's still not very big. Let's make it way bigger and a better color. There we go. So I can add strokes, etc. And so depending on what you're doing, this panel will always look different. The properties panel changes like crazy, whereas the toolbar never changes, and the layers panel changes a little bit depending on what you're working on. But those two are a little more static, and the properties panel changes a lot more. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and look at our design page. We're going to go to that. And if I zoom way out, this whole area is called the pasteboard. And this is where we work. And these little things that say iPhone 13, there are frames. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer, because what we're technically going to do is take just the login page all the way to completion today. But before you start any project, it's really, honestly, it's a very good idea to jot some things down with pencil and paper. The vast majority of us are faster that way. And you can work through some problems a little bit easier. And so this is just a quick example. It has nothing to do with our surfing app at all, but it's just something I found online. But the idea of like a small user frames, kind of like, well, if once you logged in, maybe you'd want to go to your profile page and you might be able to edit that or just look at it. Then you'd maybe click here in the search, and that would give you some search results. You'd click on one of these, you get your detailed view. Maybe you'd want to leave a review. And once you left that review, it would save. That's essentially what this real simple user flow / lo-fi wireframe is telling us. Like I said, today we're really just going to take kind of a couple of rectangles, and we're going to, in a matter of what, about 35-40 minutes, we're going to create a fairly finished looking login screen. So I think without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and zoom way in. And before I start, I want to ask if there's been any questions that are pertinent to what I've been saying.
I think so far we're all good on the question side.
All right, great. So if I click on the words up above a frame, first of all, it selects the whole frame, and I can toggle this little guy down here, and it'll tell me what's inside. And currently there's just 4 shapes, and so it just gives me some rectangles. And it'll tell me the size, 390 by 844. That's the dimensions of the current iPhone 13 or 13 Pro. And so I could go over here if I wanted to draw another one. And actually, I think I want to move this one up above. Let's move that out of the way. So we're going to design kind of right below. If I want to do an exact same artboard, I want to go over here to my frame and grab that. I could have also just hit F for frame. And I could click and type it in. I think it was 390 by yada yada. But that's not really a very good way to do it. You should just find out what this thing was. And so when I hit the frame, it opens up. Like I said, the properties panel is responsive. So it opens up a whole bunch of possible devices and or shapes. And so I want, because I already built this in the iPhone 13, we're going to stick with that, even though there's now iPhone 14 versions, and I believe it was the Pro version. So when I click this, it just kind of pops one out, and I have a blank artboard or frame that is exactly the same shape and size, which will just make this the design happen a little bit easier. I'm not going to worry about exact matching, you know, that this is exactly 100 pixels from the top, et cetera, et cetera. We're just going to kind of wing it for today. I think it's much more important to get through the concepts. So basically, I need to create a square, and I need to create 3 rectangles. Let's go ahead and zoom in. And I'm going to click R for rectangle. Again, I could have gone up there and grabbed it. And I want this first one to be a square, so I'm holding Shift. Feels fine when I'm perfectly aligned to the center of something. So if I went all the way down here, it would snap it. And that is perfectly in the center in both the left, right, and top, bottom. I don't really want it centered top, bottom, so I'm going to go ahead and move it up about like so. I'm then going to click R for rectangle again, and we're going to start creating kind of some placeholder buttons. So that seems fine. Let's make sure it's centered. So I just move it until I get that red line. And then I could draw another one, but I think it would be better to copy and paste them. So if you'll watch over here in the rectangles, there's a couple ways to do this. I could Command or Control C and Command or Control V, and you'll watch, boom, I got a rectangle 15. It doesn't look like it because it's directly on top, but if I move it down, I have another one. Great way to do it. Definitely not a problem. The other way you could do it is to hold Option on a Mac or Alt on a Windows and just drag, and you'll get another one. You'll see that now I have rectangle 16. So now in my frame that I created, I have the 4 shapes that I need. Now 2 of them are styled incorrectly, so I need to select them. There's lots and lots of ways to select something. I could click directly on it and click Shift directly on it. It's fine. It's a nice way to do it. You could also just click anywhere that doesn't have something. So I can click on the white, I can click on the gray. As long as I'm not clicking on something, it allows me to drag, and that blue area, anything I come across will become selected. And you'll see it happened up here too. So watch over here. As I drag, those rectangle 15 and rectangle 14 became highlighted. And all I want to do is turn off their fill. So Figma uses eyeballs for on off, basically visible, invisible. So I'm going to click that, and you'll see that, I know it's probably really small on your screens, and I do apologize for that. There's no way to make the Figma icons bigger. It's like it's asleep. Now it looks like it disappeared completely, and that's just because there isn't a stroke yet. So to get a stroke, I click the plus. It immediately gave me one. I'll zoom in a little bit. It is a little light. I think we should probably go with 2 pixels instead of 1, which is the default. And then I think just for consistency's sake, for the first like 3 or 4 frames of our wireframes, let's go ahead and keep them all in that gray family. So if we zoom out, in 3 minutes or whatever, we have created the initial framework for our app. It doesn't look exactly the same, but it's close enough. All right, so I need a new frame. I could again click F for frame, or go over there. I could and grab the iPhone 13 Pro. It'll put it over there, and I could drag it here. That's really not the best way to do it. What I actually want to do is copy this one, because from now on, I'm actually trying to kind of build upon something, not start from scratch. So I could Command or Control C and Command and Control V, and it'll plop one right over there. Whoops. And that's a great way of doing it. Or same thing as any other item, frames can be copied and pasted by simply holding Option or Alt and dragging. It's really up to you which one you feel is best. Honestly, there isn't a best way of doing it. So this is our typography we're going to add. And I used to have, I'm realizing, so because I've stopped using the desktop version, I have lost my little comments. So I want to put these, and it'll just demonstrate how nice this tool is. So I'm going to say add typography, and probably should put great shapes, something like that. So these will be here for me next month when I do this again, and all I have to do is hover over them, and I'll know that what happens in this frame is that I'm going to add typography. So I'll go ahead and add that as we go through. Now, I, of course, spent some time designing this, so I know exactly what font I want, and it's not necessarily going to be available on your computer. So please use your, if you're following along and actually designing with me today, just if you don't have something called Shrick Hand, which again, I'm pretty sure you don't, it might be built into Figma, but I don't think so. Just go ahead and find something that you like that is part of design. And then I've got Roboto for everything else. Roboto is a really nice Google font. It is the system font for Android devices. This is not exactly how you'd probably start. You wouldn't necessarily know. Like, I didn't know I wanted Shrick Hand, so I probably started with something like Arial. Let's see here. Where's Arial? Ooh, that's a lot of fonts I've got. My goodness. Well, we all know what Arial looks like. I just wanted to get to it, and now I can't even find it. I must be blind. There has to be Arial on my computer. Well, anyway, it doesn't matter. I maybe would have started with something like this, and everything would have just been some default sans serif font, and I would slowly figure out. And how would I do that? I would click through here, and these are all the fonts that are either loaded into Figma by default or on my computer. I could then also shop on Adobe fonts or on Google Fonts, and I would just kind of click on things, and I would say, well, does that feel like a serif font? I don't think so. I think it looks, I don't know what that looks like. That's an interesting font. It's kind of Halloween-y. It's sort of appropriate, I suppose. And you would probably not want to just click through all these. That would take forever, but you might be like, well, let's see, Baskerville. It's a really classic font. That's beautiful. If this were a fashion app, that would probably be appropriate. But these aren't really working for me. I think that my original choice of Waverly is ideal. So I zoom out. And so that's the process of finding typography. Let's go ahead and add some in here. T for type, or just go up there and tap it. We'll type out the word of our company, and it defaults to the font that you were last using. Now I moved it over until it hit that red line. There we go. And I need to move it up. And now it is perfectly centered within that square. And I think for right now, let's just go ahead and keep everything in that gray and white palette. So I clicked on the fill in the properties panel, and I can just drag up until I get to the top left. That is perfect white, and that'll do. That'll do for now. And then we want to put in username, password, sign in, and sign up. So I'm going to zoom in here, and I'm going to click the T, and I'm going to say username. Again, remember, it defaults to whatever font you were last using. So this is not good. The logo for the font is not a good font. It's a display typeface. It's very ornate and fun, and has a character to it that you don't really want for things like form fields and buttons. So we're going to go ahead and click that. I'm going to click the letter R on my computer to at least get me into the R's, because I really do have a lot of fonts. And then I'm just going to select Roboto. And it always defaults to italic in Figma. I'm not really sure why. Kind of an odd choice on their part. So you just need to change it to not italic. And that still feels just enormous, right? If I zoom out, like, that's no good. That's bad. So we need to click on that. And I'm going to say about 16 point type is going to look a lot better. And then I can just kind of slide it in there. It's nice and centered because of that red line. And one last time, we're going to make it gray. The document colors do get saved here, so I don't always have to go find that gray or use well, here, let me, if it were red, I could actually use this eyedropper and I could make it gray. In a little bit, we're going to put some photographs in here. I could grab a color directly from one of those photos. All right, so now I've got a username, and I could copy and paste it in any number of ways. Again, my preferred is just to hold that Option or Alt key and drag it down. I get perfect copy. I can then type in password. I think this was sign in, so I'm going to move this over till it, and then we can't see it because it's the gray. So let's just go ahead and make it white. I'm going to say sign in. And last but not least, let's move this down. I don't want to keep changing the color, so I'm going to grab the gray one, and I'm going to say sign up. And now everything's nice and aligned to, I don't think that is aligned actually. There we go. Now we've got everything nice and aligned and typed out in the correct fonts. It's fairly quick, but I'm starting to make a bit of a mess here with my layers. If we look at this, we've got 4 rectangles that make no sense. We've got type that's all over the place. So it's a good practice, and I may or may not do this all the way through the webinar because I don't want to spend too much time on it, because it does take time, but it actually in the end will save you so much time. When you start to have a file that perhaps, you know, is this long and has 14 images and 17 buttons and multiple paragraphs, if you have things named rectangle 15, you are going to be lost. If you were to hand this off to another designer or a developer, they're definitely not going to be happy with you. So let's real quick, let's clean this up. So I'm just going to select those 2 things, and I can right click and say group selection. And I can just name it logo. And I'm going to move it to the top in the layers panel because it's the top thing so far anyway in our whole design. I'm going to select those 2 things, and I can right click here or here. And I'm going to say group selection. I'm going to move that up to the next highest thing, and I'm just going to name it user name button, something along those lines. I'm just going to do this 2 more times. Group selection. I'm going to call that password button. Not really a button. It would be more of a form field, but that's okay for today. That's fine. Sign in. Group that. Sign in button. And these all toggle down, so they're still there. I didn't collapse anything. I didn't create uneditable elements. They're there. They're just in a more organized system. And then sign up is just text. It's not in a button, so it's totally fine just like that. So now I have a much more organized frame. I have my logo. I have my buttons in the order they appear, top to bottom, and that's going to make my life easier as I move on. So let's go ahead and copy this one over. We'll make it snap into place just with the top one. And before we go up here and we create icons, which I'm going to make a little thing here, create icons. Does anybody have any questions?
So far, no, we're still good with questions.
Great. All right. Well, this is the fun one. I feel like people get pretty excited about this one. So here we've got this little logo, and I'm actually going to stay in this frame for a minute so you can see it better. And I could use the pen tool. I could for sure have tried to kind of create a little wave, and you know, I'm pretty good at this thing. So, you know, that's not bad. It looks essentially the same. It doesn't have quite as nice of a curve there. I could certainly decide that I don't like that wave, and I want to actually design a wave that looks more like it's crashing. And how am I doing that? We're not going to use the pen tool, but how am I doing this? So basically, if I use the pen tool and I just click somewhere and let go, it makes a straight line. If I click and I stay clicked, I can then drag out these things called Bezier curves, and they're completely editable. You could make that one go that way and that one go that way, so that you have kind of infinite opportunity to edit. It's a great tool. I highly recommend playing around with the pen tool. It's not totally necessary for UI design because there are a lot of other ways to get to the same, more or less the same results using just shapes and or this little trick I'm going to show you. And then we're going to use a plugin to design these little avatar and password lock. So first, let's zoom down in here. And we've got our logo, and we're going to open that up. And this is called a rectangle because it is. If you see how I'm hanging over, just kind of hovering over this, I get those little circles in the corners. If I grab one of those and start dragging to the middle, I can get a perfect circle. And then I'm just going to name this logo frame because it's about to change, dramatically change what it looks like. And so it's kind of important that we change the name of that from rectangle. Rectangle doesn't really mean anything in this instance. So I'm going to turn the visibility off, and I'm going to add a stroke. And I want it to be that gray because we're still kind of in our initial steps. And I think it should be about 5 pixels thick. So I'm telling the stroke to be 5 pixels thick by typing it in there manually. And then our text is white, so we can't see it anymore. So let's go ahead and make it gray again, and we've got that. And this is the point where I would maybe use the pen tool to draw a wave. But I'm going to show you a pretty cool little trick. So I'm going to copy and paste the logo type over. I'm going to double click in, and I'm actually just going to select everything but the Y, and I'm going to delete it. And I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Oh, how am I zooming out? Sorry about that. I am command minusing and command plusing, or holding the Z. If I touch Z with my on my keyboard, you'll see that my little black icon direct selection tool turns into magnifying glass. I don't actually know how to make that a minus. So I most of the time zoom in by clicking Z, and most of the time zoom out by command I. That's my process. There probably is a key command. I honestly don't know how to make Z also be a minus. It's the great thing about software and tools, right? You learn them the way that you learn them. So I want to make this bigger, and it's still a font. So I could just type it in here. I could say 100, and I get a bigger Y. But I actually want to turn this into a shape. I want it to be more like a rectangle or circle than a letter. So I'm going to right click, and I'm going to say outline stroke. When you right click, you get this whole panel of things. That's where I was able to group things. That's how I could create a component, etc. But I want right now to outline the stroke. And you'll see that right now it's got a little T next to it in the layers. It's telling me it's a type layer. When I outline the stroke, you'll see that that changes. It is no longer a type layer. It is no longer a font for that matter. See how the properties panel no longer tells us Schrick hand. It just tells me, oh, you have a form that's this gray color. I can then scale it much easier. And how am I doing that? If I hover over a corner, any corner, and hold shift, I can drag out and make this shape much bigger. If I wanted to rotate, I don't quite hover over the whole thing. I hover near, and you'll see how it turns into that. I can then rotate. I can hold shift, and it'll do it in 15-degree increments. There are other ways of rotating. You could type it in over here and say 90. I generally just hover. It feels more natural to me. And so the part that I want is this part. It's actually already a wave. It's built into my logo, into the font that I had used. So I'm going to rotate that about like so, and I'm going to double click. And I essentially want to remove all of the points in this Y that don't make that little wave. So I'm going to select like that and like that. And when I hit delete, it's going to look like it disappeared, but it's actually still there. Get the same thickness. Anything. And I think I gave it one too many points, or it's just not, wait, no, that's right. That's right. So then I want to just make this look a little more like that. I can continue to scale it up like so. I still feel like that looks different. I think I grabbed, that's interesting. It's the same Y. Well, we're getting a slightly different wave today, and that's totally fine too. I may have one extra point. That's what it is there. I just need to delete that one. Now it's perfect. I can then kind of scale this up, center it on the sides, move it maybe down a little bit. And very quickly, I was able to get a really nice form that honestly, no user is going to notice that it came from the Y. But intuitively, humans, our eyes are very sophisticated, and they'll feel that there's a harmony by doing it that way. So in some ways, it's easier than using the pen tool, and it has the added value of it creates a visual harmony. So now we're going to go ahead and add these little avatars. I'm going to zoom in here. We can definitely go over that again. I almost guarantee there'll be some questions, but let me go ahead and do these. So I could, of course, draw a little block. There's no reason that I couldn't. I'm just going to draw using the rectangle. I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to turn the stroke on. I'm going to make it 2 pixels because that's what these frames are. So I'm trying to create some unity. I want it to be that same gray. I can zoom in. I could make this a circle. Put that like so. Probably mask it or something, or trying to think how I would do this. Probably mask it. So a mask, you draw a shape over something. You actually have to put it under the thing you drew. Go like that, right click, use as mask. Oops. It needs to be under the part that you want to keep. So you select both, you right click, and you use as mask. And then I could, whoops. You need to grab the whole thing. It's called a mask group. You move this over. Maybe scale it down a little bit. Move it over. That's cool. There's nothing wrong at all with that little lock. But first of all, I've been doing this forever. And secondly, even though I drew it, it's fine. It's not as good as that one. So I recommend that you learn how to draw with these tools, of course, but that you also, as a designer, learn to work smarter, not harder. And so there are thousands, if not millions, of icons that other designers have made available. And they're available in Sketch and XD as well, but Figma really has a remarkable amount of user-generated community tools. And so I'm going to use auto icon. Just type this, and you just click run. This would have been on the community page where we started, but this is another place to find plugins. Let me go back real quick. So it could have opened there. I'm on plugins because I already have these loaded. That's why I can select this. But if I wanted, say, a photo generator, you just type it in. It's like a Google search. So photo, and it's going to think for a minute, and it's going to give me a bunch of options for different plugins, because I'm on the plugins part, that might do photos. But for right now, I just want to do icons. So I'm going to say run. It takes a couple seconds. Not amazing UX here where they don't tell you anything. Like, I feel like there should be a little loading thing or whatever. And then again, just like a Google search, I can just type in here. So I want a lock and an avatar. Let's go ahead and start with the lock. So I could type in lock. Let's see what that gives me. That seems just fine. I could have also typed in password. Let's just see what that would have given me. So it's, oops, I typed, you got to spell it right. Kind of up to you how you use this. Password seems to give me more keys and little code-like things. So I personally think lock looks better. It's more intuitive for me. If it has a little crown next to it, you have to pay for it. And if it doesn't, it's free. There's 64,000 icons, I think, in this auto icon, 69,000 icons. I would say 25% of them are free. So, you know, it's a good, it'll get you started. So I click that, and Figma puts it in a funny place. It just puts it kind of random. So I'm gonna zoom in. All I did was click that, and it generated one. And I wanna move this out of the frame that it was in, and I actually wanna delete that frame. And then for the sake of smart naming, I should probably say lock icon or something along those lines. I'm going to drag it in to this artboard and see how right now it's outside of this frame. This is my frame, and it's not within that. So when I pull this into the frame, it moved. It moved it into this frame. So everything is always contained when you're designing within a frame. So now I can zoom in. I'm going to scale this down a little bit. I'm going to get it to where those lines are the same. I want them still to look like two pixels. One last time, let's make it that gray color. And then we'll go ahead and we'll run that plugin again. And we'll type in, let's try avatar this time. So avatar, I assume that will give me something along the lines of what I have up above. Doesn't have to be perfect. Because we're using all strokes instead of fills, I don't really want these icons. I'm making an aesthetic choice there. So I'm gonna click this one. Again, it doesn't look like anything happened, but if I zoom out, kind of randomly put it here, so I can just grab this guy and move it out of the frame, delete it. I can then group this. Let's go ahead and, because it's two pieces. So I'm gonna go ahead and right click, group selection. I'm gonna name it avatar icon, and I'm gonna move it into my artboard frame. Sorry. It does take a while to remember new terms, and Figma changing artboard to frame is one of those. It's a little hard for me. Doesn't really matter, I suppose. So if I scale this down to be the exact same size, its stroke gets a little bit too thin. They don't feel the same next to each other. So I'm gonna try that. That's approximately 2-point stroke. I'm gonna move that up to about there. It's now centered within its button. I'm gonna click both of these, and there's an alignment tool, and I'm gonna center align them. So now they're perfectly aligned, centered. I'm gonna select both of these and make them gray so that we have a nice unified look and feel. Much quicker. Now, it doesn't mean that you didn't design. It's not like I'm being lazy. It's just that a lot of these things have just been designed so many times over, and they're better. They're just faster, better than what I want. Now, because we're doing a surfing app, I might want to do some customization. So I will show you that in a minute. I definitely am not saying as a UI designer, you don't get to be creative and design things. It's just that when we're in these first stages of the iterative process, you're really just trying to get your ideas out there. You want to share it with shareholders or your boss or whomever. And so it's better to get that way. And if it is something like a search icon, for instance, like a magnifying glass, I don't think there's any reason to ever draw a magnifying glass ever again. I don't know how we would ever add our own personal flavor to it. So I think plugins come in really handy for things of that sort. So I'm going to copy that over again. So I have that exact copy. And before I add a photo, I want to make sure we don't have any questions. I have a feeling maybe we're going to have some questions about the logo.
And we do have a couple of questions. I'll just work my way from the top. Tiago is asking, sorry, I missed the beginning, how to set up my frame as an iPhone 13 frame.
Oh, no worries. You would go over to the frame, the little hashtaggy looking thing, or type the letter F. And when you click frame, over here in the properties panel, a whole bunch of different possible devices and social media sizes, etc. pop up. You just want to toggle down the phone. Since I designed this, they've added 14, but iPhone 13 Pro is what I was working on. If you click on it, it just gives you one. It gives you a blank.
Awesome. And then another question from Melanie is related to the wave. How do I make my wave stay on top of the design?
If I understand the question, which I can't guarantee I do, the wave, this should not have a fill. So technically this shouldn't matter, top, bottom, above, below, but let me try and do, so if I gave this a fill, if I turn this back on, just make it red or something. And then this, we should probably call that wave not Y so that it's more clear. And we should, honestly, we should move it into our logo. So if this wave were under the frame, then it would technically disappear in this scenario. Again, if I turned off that red, it kind of doesn't matter in this case, but I think it's good practice. So I hope I'm answering this question right. It's good practice to have your layers panel set up kind of top to bottom, as though kind of pieces of paper were laying on top of each other. And therefore, if the wave is supposed to be seen above and through the frame, it should technically be above. So this would be the better way to set up your layer. I hope that's what you were asking.
And we've also got a question from Catherine, a little bit of a longer question. I've just been learning about the material design system and framework. If the developers in a project you're working on are using material, would you always use the Google icon sticker sheet for icons? Or are there ever any instances where you would mix and match between Google and other icon kits?
You could mix and match, or draw your own. So kind of back to what I was saying, you would want to use their kit as much as possible. Thankfully, Material and Android, the Google App Store is considerably less of a stickler for using those platform-specific assets. Apple is notoriously difficult. You pretty much have to use Apple icons. But if you could draw one to match, so again, this surfing app, here in a minute, we're gonna kind of draw real quickly, kind of like a hang loose hand and a surfboard. So as long as you kept, say, the stroke weights, the corner radiuses, things of that nature, exactly the same as what Android's kit looks like, there shouldn't be a problem. Apple, there could be a problem, but they've been loosening up a little bit in recent years and allowing us designers to have a little bit more fun and create things that are a little bit more unique and ours. But as a general rule, when designing specifically for mobile, it is probably best to use either the Material or the iOS kits to make sure that it gets approved and actually gets to be for sale on their app stores.
I think, yeah, let's move on and we'll answer some more questions further on.
Okay, cool. So there are a lot of ways to add a photo into Figma, and actually one that I just learned recently, which is kind of neat. So I'm going to go to Unsplash, and oh, that's nice. It just loaded on stuff that's kind of appropriate for our. We're not going to use this picture, but I could just right-click and say Copy Image, and go to my frame, and I could say Paste here. I moved it over, but it's there. And I could then move this to the bottom, and oof, that is sexy. Maybe we're going to change the look of our app today. That looks so nice. That was completely unexpected. But anyway, you can copy and paste literally from a stock photo house into your app. It's super neat. I just learned this one. You can also, of course, I'm gonna go ahead and delete that. It's gonna throw me off that it looks so different. I could also right click and, nope, that's not true. I could go over here and I could do File. Is it File? Geez, now I've forgotten all the other ways. I saw it when we were doing this. Sorry, I'm forgetting. I'm being dumb today. Oh yeah, it's under shapes. They essentially consider that to be a shape. So I could say place image, and I don't think you're going to be able to see this window because of the way I'm sharing on big marker today. But I could then navigate to a folder, such as, yeah, you can't see it, but I could navigate to a folder and I could grab the correct photo, and it's loading it for a second. And still loading. Oh, geez. I don't think this photo is that big. Let's give it one more minute. Goodness gracious. We may go back to that black and white just so we can continue moving on. All right. I don't even know if I can do anything now that it's sort of trying to add the image. Yep. Okay. I was able to cancel that. So let's go backwards. Why not? Let's redesign. So I always, at the end of this, we're gonna jump forward a little bit. I think it's gonna be fun, and it will mean I don't have to do this one. So essentially, as the designer for this, I made a decision that I kind of thought it'd be cool to have a little bit more of a retro feel. And to that end, I chose an image with a lot of browns and warm earth tones that makes me feel of 70s and retro. The font is very 70s and feels of a certain vintage and age. And all my colors kind of followed along with that. And then usually at the end of this, I say, but what if I wanted to do something different? I could quickly take this and this off, and I could change this back to Roboto. And we'll just do this real quick, Roboto, because I'm going to actually design it all. And I could play with this, and pretty quickly I could make a completely different app that doesn't look at all retro anymore. So why don't we do that today? Why not? I really like that photo, and I really kind of like this black and white. So I think this font is now no longer right. And for the purposes of saving time, let's go ahead and just make the whole thing Roboto. So back over there in the properties panel. And we'll go ahead with that. As I said, it always defaults to italic, a little odd, but it's okay. Bold. Let's make it all uppercase. How about? So Waverly, I just typed it out again. There is a setting that I could have done for to make it just be all caps. And then let's play with the letter spacing or the kerning. Let's make it way, way wider. So I think we want to do 100. Okay, that's too wide. So let's make it 90. Still a little wide. 80. I'm just kind of typing in the percentage of the screen that it's kind of using. That still feels, I'm going to go down a little bit. There, that looks better. And then probably you could make an argument for using these circles and the wave. For right now, I think I'm going to move it off because I think it makes more sense with this new, really sophisticated black and white scenario that maybe we do something like that. You could make it interact with the text or the actual image a little bit. Yeah, so we're just gonna move this direction, and we're still gonna do all the same things. So we've added a photo. So I should probably put that there so that we know, add photos. Just a nice, quick, easy way for us to make notes. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that one. And this one is all about adding color. So for our reference, I was using these very warm earth tones and whatnot. We're not going to have as much color to do, obviously, because I chose a black and white. And I think this looks really nice, but maybe you would want a pop of color. You don't want it all to be so monochromatic. So maybe, I don't know, let's take it into the oranges. Orange and gray look pretty good together, right? So maybe we would do something like that. Maybe this button, so just toggle things. You just want to click the rectangular part, and it's now starting to save that. Any color in my documents is saved here. Really, really nice. I can toggle these guys down. Again, I'm just trying to click the frame parts and make that orange. And pretty quickly, I don't want to belabor this too much, but I do want us to get to a good spot fairly quickly. I'll zoom in here. I can then make the username. I can also double click. I don't have to go toggling everything. Double clicking will also give me the layer I'm looking for. So click these guys, them orange, double click password, make it orange. And last but not least, the lock, make it orange. Probably for accessibility purposes, this should go to a darker. I think that white and orange would give us some trouble. So I could just make absolute black. There's nothing wrong with that. I could also grab like a little bit of a charcoal. So see how I'm on the eyedropper? Wherever I go, this is like a big view of it as well. So I actually far preferred it as black and white with just all grays, but I needed to go through a process of showing you color. That's not bad. It's not bad. I don't hate it. So that is how you do it. If you need to go find a custom color, that's how you would do it. And very quickly, you've got that. All right, so, well, first of all, any questions on color?
We have got some questions. I think the let me have a look. Karina is asking, can you change frames during the design process, and would they adapt to the designs, or would you have to start all over and copy paste the entire work?
Change frame. Can you ask that question one more time? I'm going to think really hard while you're saying it.
Yeah, can you change frames during the design process, and would they adapt to the designs, or would you have to start all over and copy and paste the entire work? I suppose maybe. I don't know.
So we're always changing frames. Like I've been adding a new frame. That's essentially changing frames. If I wanted to, that's where components come in handy. So let's just say that I really like this button. This sign up button is awesome, and I'm for sure going to reuse it 100 times. I can right click on it and I can say create a component, and you'll see that it now turned purple and has these little purple diamonds. That's a component. I can then find it over here. It's a sign in button, and I can then reuse that. And if I double click in here, well, let me put it somewhere else. I'm just gonna put it here. Let's just say I had a new frame and it was over here. If I double click on this one, I can change its color. I don't know, let's make it that color. And when I go back to my frame, it changed the color. So there are ways, I hope I'm answering this question. So you can create components which then would not need to be changed over and over and over. They can be changed once, and that change will be representative in all of your frames. But there is definitely, hopefully again, I'm understanding your question. There are quite a few things you just have to do manually in order to get it to get everything designed correctly. It's another reason actually that this is so important. You want to kind of think through a lot of these decisions in the pencil stage when you haven't used hours and hours, and get through some of those thoughts and ideas and changes before you start digitizing everything. I hope that question is answered.
Thank you. And another question is, how do you add the image, please?
Oh, no worries. So there was a couple ways. The first one, I just went to this thing called Unsplash. Here, let's do it again. Let me get out of here. So I just went to Unsplash. It happened to have black and white water as the command. So we could go surfers, and it'll pull up. It's just a stock photo site, and this one's cool. I like that one. So you just click onto it, and then I right clicked and said copy image. And when I go back to the tab that's Figma, and I need to go my layers, and I need to go to this image, I can just paste Command C or Command V or Control V or right and just paste here. Right click and paste here, and it'll take a second. I think it'll take a second. All right, didn't like that. Paste here. I'm just going to paste it wherever. Let's try it again. Copy image. Paste here. Well, you all saw it at work the first time. I don't know where it is. That's exactly how I did it. Honestly, though, that's very much an academic way of doing it. When you are the designer or the boss, total control over this. To be completely honest, the most common way of adding an image while designing is that there's already a folder of photographs that the company or the client has given you, and in that case, you would go to the place image in the shapes, and you would click that. And again, because of the way I'm sharing on big marker, you don't get to see this unfortunately, but a pop-up menu just showed up, and it's just showing a bunch of folders on my computer. You would put that folder and you would grab the correct photo. So the copy paste one, which isn't working anymore, is fun, but it's not necessarily the way that you would do it. Most likely you would have a system of, or you would have a whole bunch of folders of imagery that you were meant to use for a specific project.
Another question from Tiago is, how do I move the image without moving the frame?
Awesome question. Because if I just click, you're right, it just wants to grab it. So you need to either double click, and you see how image is now the only thing. So let me do that again. If I just grab, everything is highlighted, and therefore everything moves. If I double click, only image one, and I can then move that around.
Nice. Also some questions about Unsplash. You can use the photos on there. It's royalty free, I think, and lots of free content.
That's right. Yeah, it's I don't know how any of these photographers are making a living, but we have something like that. It's a really amazing stock photography asset, and don't have that same kind of cheap quality that so much stock photography used. So Unsplash is a really good reference for you. I think the only thing left to do, and I know we're a little bit behind time today, I time with the true system. I think I'll just go in here. I think is the better one because it's going to seem really hard to you, but I'm going to actually bring an image in. It's one that's saved on my computer and is interesting. I think that I'm about this whole time realizing. So let me time. Play ball. Figma is giving me a lot of with images in, and you know that's part of being a UI solve problems. So I'm actually just going to go over here onto my desktop and drag it in, and it still doesn't want to do it. That's crazy. I don't actually know what's going on. Could be a good reason to continue using the desktop app because there may be something going on with my with the browser. That's so interesting. Because I actually just took that and pulled it in to, and it's no, that's so wild. I've never seen anything like that. I'm gonna try one more time, and then we're just gonna draw. We're just gonna draw because I do want to show you how to use the pen tool to create something that's a little bit more custom. No, I cannot get an image to come in. That's so wild. It just stopped working a few minutes ago, right? When I after I got that one to work. All right, so we're just gonna zoom in. It's fine. I wanted to have a reference because I wanted to show you that you don't actually have to know how to draw super well. I was gonna have a picture of a hang loose hand and you just trace it, but it's okay. I can wing it. So that I just clicked because I wanted a straight wrist. Then I click and don't let go. So I drag, and then I click on that so that I just have that Bezier curve. I didn't want that one going off this way. I can get that hand, I can get the thumb essentially like so, kind of going into the knuckles, and then probably need to draw all three knuckles like so. It was a lot easier with the reference material. And so, you know, kind of going back and forth between the click kind and the drag kind, I can start to help refine. And nothing is permanent. Like every last bit of this can be moved and edited and made to look more like I want it to after the fact. I could go in and clean this up quite a bit more, get all those knuckles looking right, get all the fingers, get the last finger over here. And then it's completely editable, and I can go in here, I can make it the thickness I want, the stroke weight I want, the color I want, et cetera, et cetera. So I do apologize, you couldn't see the reference image. For some reason, Figma will not let me bring a new photo in. I'm like dead in the water with that part of Figma this morning, but everything else, we've essentially gone from 4 rectangles to a logo to then let's say the client just suddenly was like, no, we're not doing retro. We don't want retro. We want something much cleaner, much more sophisticated and up to date. We still had that skeleton, and that's kind of the whole point. Like, this is your basic framework, and then you're creating essentially a skeleton that you can then color and change infinitely with not too much trouble. I think that's it.
All right, let me just join the room again. So we have got some questions, some more specific questions, and some more general questions. Let's take a general question to start off with.
Okay.
And apologies if I pronounce anyone's name wrong. That's not intentional. What makes Figma better in comparison to Sketch? I know we get a lot of questions about different software, but
Yeah.
Craig, if you want to answer that.
Short answer: it's not. It's not better. However, I think Sketch is making a big mistake by not doing anything for Windows users. That's a large demographic that they've kind of decided they're not interested in working with. Sketch came out first, and Sketch has a kind of like the community here with all the plugins and stuff. They have a huge amount of third-party plugins. They maybe lean a little too heavily on that. There's oftentimes some compatibility issues because they don't do a lot of updates. Sketch does tons of updates and the plugins don't. But it's a great tool. At the end of the day, Sketch, XD, and Figma all send out the same files. You end up with the same final product. And I'll just preempt this question. With Adobe purchasing Figma, there will be some changes next year for sure. And usually I'm not a big fan of corporate mergers and such. I think for us as designers, this is going to be a good thing. I genuinely do. I think it's a little weird that we have 3 tools that do the exact same thing. So I'm going to predict that's available on Windows, and that similar to the way Adobe's done it in the past, I'll probably integrate.
I think Craig is breaking up a little bit. The connection to Costa Rica.
Figma in. Oh, am I breaking up?
A little bit, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Am I breaking up?
Yeah, or maybe it's just for me.
Costa Rica.
Is it my internet or is it your internet? I've got no idea. Sometimes it's mine.
Yeah, right. I'm gonna go out on a limb that it's mine. So, how much did you hear? I was just kind of saying how I think that Adobe will probably remove XD from their products and just make it Figma and integrate it more into their Creative Cloud.
Yeah, I think that was the end bit. Awesome.
Okay.
I'm just thinking, are there any other questions? In picking colors, what are the best ways to combine colors?
That's super subjective. I don't know if I have an answer. Sometimes it's going to be dictated. You're going to have the brand that they have their colors in the real world. As a student, if you're enrolled here at CareerFoundry or want to, it is going to be your. But sometimes you can use if you're using photography, you can use that as a jumping off point. I think that there are some great tools for matching colors, finding color palettes. Yeah, I think that's too subjective and too personal. I think that you just kind of feel it out and don't be afraid to experiment. Like, I don't ever have the right answer first try.
Awesome. I will also say now that if you did enjoy this session this evening, Craig does another session, which is an introduction to Adobe XD. If you want to learn the tool Adobe XD. And also CareerFoundry offers a free UI design short course, which kind of takes you to the next step beyond this webinar. I think it's 5 or 6 days. And that'll kind of, you'll see some of the skills that we learned this evening, but you get to kind of take it a little bit further down the road. So one of my colleagues will post it in the chat on the right-hand side, but I'll also include it in the email tomorrow along with the recording from this evening. So everybody can get that. Carlos is asking, where in Costa Rica are you located?
I'm in Nosara.
Okay, awesome. Elmi is asking, when is this going to end? Don't worry, Elmi, we will be sending out the recording tomorrow, so if you joined late, there is no worries there. Craig, maybe you could tell us a little bit about the CareerFoundry UI design program, because I know some people this evening are probably thinking about taking a leap into UI design. Maybe talk a little bit about what the program kind of offers, or some of the projects that you may be working along there. That could be kind of interesting.
Yeah, sure. So they break it into an intro and an immersion. An intro is essentially like reverse engineering. You're going to learn the program of your choice. You can use Sketch, XD, or Figma. And we give you working files. And so you can tap into those things. You can see the dimensions, the color, the typography, etc. And then you build it yourself. You recreate it. It's not super different than, I guess, what I was doing up here. I wasn't following my design like pixel perfect, and you're meant to do that. But the idea is that you've got a frame of reference and then you rebuild it. Then the immersion course is 5 achievements long, and they run the gamut from very, very visually focused to very heavily UX focused. The achievement 2 in the immersion course is a pretty deep dive into the UX side of things. And you'll do user testing and research strategy. And then you'll take all of that and it informs your design for achievement 3. So a very real world kind of scenario where you don't just get to make all the decisions. There's some mobile specific. You'll do achievement 4 where you do everything to the Android or iOS standards, like we were talking about with that earlier question. So you learn how to use those kits and make sure that it would pass the tests that those 2 platforms require of you. And then you kind of put it all together in achievement 5, and you learn a little bit of animation, and you create a bunch of case studies and get that up on Behance. There's specialization courses you can choose from. At the end, one of them would be to build a website and display all your work that way. One is to learn more animation. If you really enjoy doing motion design, I do a lot of animation myself. It's a lot of fun. It's a different kind of way of being creative. And the other is audio. I'm going to call this wrong, but audio design, essentially, like the UI behind speaking to our machines, our devices, and or what do they sound like and how do they interact with us.
Awesome. And yeah, just one thing is that we, all the students, whilst they progress through the program, are putting together a portfolio of all these projects. So when it comes to the moment when you're kind of like in the job interview setting, you actually have a portfolio to talk through and explain. And the great thing about that is that you can explain every step of the way, because you've developed this along with your mentor, just like Craig, or your CareerFoundry tutor too. I'm mindful of the time.
Oh yeah, I want to mention that.
Okay, go jump in.
Are we out of time? I just wanted to say one other thing that is actually really, really neat about CareerFoundry. We all end up doing some sort of continuing education. I do, everyone does. It's somewhat isolating often when you're trying to learn, a new skill and you have no one to talk to. I like the CareerFoundry program from the standpoint that you have a tutor that you're in contact with every task. Now you don't meet in this way, but so you don't ever really talk to them, but you're constantly writing. They're giving you feedback as you go, and you're building a project together. And then your mentor, someone like myself, we do video calls, and you can share your screen. We can solve problems. We can talk about career work, aesthetics, and so you've actually part of the CareerFoundry program.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, Craig. I think everyone's saying thanks a lot in the chat too. I think that was a super informative session. And I think for anybody that wants to take it on to the next stage, I would definitely recommend doing the short course, UI design short course, to just take you that little step further along the way. Also, for great resources, CareerFoundry has a fantastic blog with lots of blog articles. Some are more specific, but some are more general about career change. And we've also got a YouTube channel, which is put together by the video team with some great content on there too. If you are interested in taking a CareerFoundry program, I would recommend booking a call with a program advisor. If you want to talk about the curriculum, maybe jobs in your locality, mentorship at CareerFoundry, all the career services, the lifetime career services, and the job guarantee that we offer, I would definitely recommend booking a call. And this October, we are offering career change scholarships worth up to $1,445 or €1,260 off the full price of our UI design program. So all you have to do to apply for that is just book a call with a program advisor and bring along any questions that you may have about the program. Craig, thank you so much for this evening. As I said before, next month, Craig will be doing a Adobe XD, so an intro to Adobe XD, and do check out also the CareerFoundry events page, because we also do interviews with graduates and people who have landed a job in tech, and they can tell you all about their kind of story. And yeah, I wish everyone a good evening. And if you're in the Southern Hemisphere or in different locations, maybe good morning or lunchtime. So that's everything. And I'm going to sign off. Craig, thanks once again, and see you next time.